In a forgotten Pennsylvania town, a desperate divorced mother bid her last $100 on an abandoned cathedral. What started as a reckless gamble for financial independence took a devastating turn when she discovered a hidden vault in the crypt. Elena Russo wasn't your typical single mother. For years, she'd studied Renaissance art and Vatican history, able to recognize priceless artifacts others overlooked. When she uncovered documents worth $175 million, she had no idea she was walking into a 70-year conspiracy, one that would force her to choose between her children's safety and exposing the truth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the St. Augustine County Hall, each word a hammer strike against Elena Russo's last nerve. She stood near the back, fingers wrapped around 5 $20 bills in her jacket pocket. Around her, locals shifted in their metal folding chairs, waiting for something worth bidding on. Next item, the auctioneer announced, consulting his clipboard. County Property 847B, the former Cathedral of St. Teresa, 18th-century structure located at 1847 Mercy Road. Property sold as is, no inspection, no warranty. Opening bid $100. Silence. Elena's heart hammered. She'd driven past the cathedral twice this week, both times telling herself she was being ridiculous. The building was a ruin. Everyone in St. Augustine knew that. Abandoned since the diocese closed it in the 80s, it had become a landmark of decay. Teenagers told stories about it. The Historical Society had given up. Even the county just wanted it gone. But Elena had seen something else in those broken walls. She'd seen the ribbed vaulting, the Gothic arches, the bones of something that had once been extraordinary. Most importantly, she'd seen square footage, rooms, potential. She'd seen a bed and breakfast. She'd seen financial independence. She'd seen a way to never again stand in Marcus's lawyer's office, powerless and humiliated. "Mom, we should go." Sophie's voice was low, urgent. Her daughter stood beside her, arms crossed, projecting the kind of mature exasperation only a 16-year-old could manage. "This is insane." $100, the auctioneer repeated. "Do I have 100? Elena's hand went up before she could talk herself out of it. The auctioneer's eyebrows rose slightly. "We have 100 from bidder 43. Do I hear 110? The silence stretched. Someone coughed. A chair scraped against linoleum. Going once. The auctioneer scanned the room. Going twice. His gavel came down with a crack that made Elena flinch. Sold to bidder 43 for $100. "Jesus Christ, Mom." Sophie's voice carried equal parts horror and resignation. Liam, Elena's 12-year-old, had been sketching in his notebook throughout the auction. Now he looked up, eyes bright with something Elena couldn't quite read. "Fear? Excitement? Do we get to go inside?" he asked. "Yes," Elena said, though her voice came out shakier than she'd intended. "We do." The paperwork took 20 minutes. The county clerk seemed almost apologetic as Elena signed document after document, each one emphasizing that she was accepting the property in its current condition, that any structural issues were her responsibility, that the county bore no liability for what might happen once she took possession. "You sure about this?" the clerk asked, not unkindly. Elena thought about her checking account balance. $234 until Friday's paycheck from the museum. She thought about the cramped 2-bedroom apartment she shared with her children, where Sophie slept on the couch and Elena woke at 5 a.m. to the sound of their neighbor's television through paper-thin walls. She thought about Marcus's new house. For bedrooms, a lawn, a garage where he kept his classic car, the one he'd bought 3 months after the divorce was finalized. "I'm sure," she said. The key was old iron, heavy in her palm. It looked like something from a movie set, the kind of prop that suggested dungeons and secrets. The clerk handed it over with a shrug. "Good luck," he said. "You'll need it." The cathedral looked worse up close. Elena stood in the gravel parking lot, Sophie sulking beside her, Liam already halfway to the entrance. Afternoon light slanted through broken windows, casting fractured patterns across weeds that had cracked through the concrete front steps. The building was massive. Elena had known that intellectually, but standing before it, she felt the weight of what she'd done. The main structure rose 3 stories, its facade a study in Gothic Revival architecture. Pointed arches, stone tracery, a rose window that had lost most of its glass but still held the iron framework. The slate roof sagged in places. Bird nests clogged the gutters. "This is a death trap," Sophie said flatly. "Someone's going to get sued when this thing collapses on us." "It's not going to collapse." Elena heard the uncertainty in her own voice. "You don't know that. I know about architecture. I studied art history." Sophie cut her off. "Which you never finished because you had to work to put Dad through medical school. And then he left anyway." The words hit like they always did. Clean and sharp. Elena had been 23 when she'd met Marcus Russo. He'd been in his first year of medical school, charming and ambitious and full of plans. She'd been finishing her master's thesis on Renaissance frescoes in abandoned churches. The irony wasn't lost on her now. They'd married that summer. She'd taken a job at a museum to help with his student loans. She'd put her doctorate on hold. Just temporarily, they'd agreed. 15 years later, she'd found the texts on his phone. The colleague from the hospital. The hotel receipts. The divorce had been efficient and brutal. Marcus kept the house, most of their savings, and his career. Elena got primary custody and an apartment she could barely afford. "Let's just look inside," Elena said quietly. "That's all I'm asking." Sophie sighed but followed. The key stuck in the lock. Elena jiggled it, applying pressure until something clicked. The door swung inward on protesting hinges, revealing darkness thick with dust. The smell hit first: mildew, rot, decades of abandonment. Elena's eyes adjusted slowly. The nave stretched before them, vast and hollow. Pews lay scattered like broken teeth. The floor was treacherous with debris, plaster, wood, glass. Above, the vaulted ceiling still held, ribbed arches meeting in shadowy heights. "Careful," Elena warned, though Liam had already moved ahead, his footsteps echoing. Despite everything, the smell, the decay, the magnitude of her mistake, Elena felt something stir in her chest. The proportions were right. The bones were good. The light, filtering through the broken rose window, created patterns across the floor that took her breath away. She could see it, not as it was, but as it could be. Guest rooms in the old rectory, a common area in the nave, the crypt converted to wine storage. It would take money she didn't have and time she couldn't spare. But, "Mom!" Liam's voice echoed from near the altar. He was crouched by the base of the raised platform, his fingers tracing something Elena couldn't see from this distance. "What is it?" She picked her way through debris, Sophie trailing reluctantly behind. "Look!" Liam pointed to a stone in the altar's foundation. The stone was different from the others, darker, smoother, and carved into its surface was a symbol Elena didn't recognize. Not a cross, something older, more complex. Interlocking circles with characters she thought might be Latin, though the centuries had worn them nearly smooth. "It's loose," Liam said. Elena knelt beside him, running her fingers along the stone's edges. He was right. There was give to it, a slight movement that shouldn't exist in masonry this old. "Don't touch it," Sophie warned from behind them. "This place is probably full of asbestos or black mold or—" "It's a mason's mark," Elena interrupted, her art history training surfacing. "Churches used them to identify the craftsmen who built different sections. But this one—" She frowned. "This isn't typical for the period. These symbols look almost—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't know how to. "Can we open it?" Liam asked. Elena looked at her son. At 12, he was already taller than she'd expected, all angles and growing bones. He had Marcus's dark hair but her gray eyes. Right now, those eyes held something she recognized. The same desperate hope she'd felt in the county hall an hour ago. "Not today," she said finally, standing and brushing dust from her jeans. "But we'll come back. Tomorrow. We'll bring tools." "Tomorrow," Sophie said. You have your shift at the museum, then your substitute teaching at Jefferson until 4. When exactly are you planning to play archaeologist in this death trap? Elena looked around the cathedral, at the broken windows and rotting pews, at the ceiling that might collapse and the floor that might give way, at the marked stone that shouldn't exist. She thought about her apartment, about Marcus's new house, about Sophie's college applications sitting on their kitchen table, all requiring money Elena didn't have. "I'll make time," she said. The three of them stood in the gathering shadows of the abandoned cathedral, each lost in their own thoughts. Elena's hand found Liam's shoulder, pulling him close. Sophie remained apart, as she so often did these days, but she didn't leave. Outside, the October wind picked up, whistling through broken windows. The sound was almost like voices, Elena thought, like the building itself was trying to say something. She'd bought the cathedral on impulse, with money she couldn't afford to lose, for a dream that was probably impossible. But standing there in the failing light, with her children beside her and that strange marked stone at her feet, Elena Russo felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd found something that could change everything. She just had no idea how right she was. Elena returned to the cathedral alone the next morning, Marcus's voice still echoing in her head from last night's phone call. He'd heard about the purchase. Sophie must have mentioned it during their weekly FaceTime. His tone had been that particular blend of concern and condescension he'd perfected during their marriage. "A cathedral, Elena? Really? What are you trying to prove?" Everything she'd wanted to say. That I'm not the woman you left behind. That I can build something without you. That our children can watch their mother succeed instead of surrender. Instead, she'd said, "It's an investment," and hung up before he could laugh. Now, standing in the cathedral's nave with morning light filtering through broken windows, Elena felt the weight of that lie. Investment implied strategy, research, planning. What she'd done was impulse dressed up as hope. The crowbar felt heavy in her hand as she descended into the crypt. The stairs were treacherous, stone worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, now slick with moisture and debris. She'd brought a powerful LED flashlight, and its beam cut through darkness that seemed almost solid. The crypt was smaller than she'd expected but more intact. Unlike the nave above, the underground space had been protected from weather and vandalism. Stone columns supported the vaulted ceiling. The air smelled of damp earth and something else, old paper maybe or fabric long past decay. Elena found the marked stone easily in daylight filtering through a narrow ground-level window. Up close, she could see the carving more clearly. The interlocking circles formed a pattern she now recognized from her graduate work, a labyrinth design common in medieval churches. But the characters around it were wrong. Too precise, too deliberate. She wedged the crowbar into the gap Liam had discovered. The stone resisted, then shifted with a grinding sound that made her wince. Dust cascaded down. She worked carefully, remembering her training. Historical sites required gentle hands, patience, respect for what had been built. The stone came free suddenly, nearly pulling her forward. She caught herself, breathing hard, and set it aside. Behind it, metal gleamed in her flashlight beam. Elena's hands trembled as she cleared away surrounding stones. An iron door, maybe 3 feet square, set into the wall. The metal was pitted with rust but intact, its surface decorated with more of those precise symbols. A locking mechanism sat at the center, complex, mechanical, clearly designed to keep people out, or keep something in. She studied the lock for 20 minutes, her art history knowledge colliding with basic problem solving. The mechanism used a series of rotating discs, each marked with symbols that corresponded to those on the door's surface. It was a puzzle lock, common in Renaissance-era security systems for valuable manuscripts. The solution came from the marked stone itself. The labyrinth pattern wasn't decorative. It was a key. She traced the path with her finger, noting where it intersected with specific symbols, then applied that sequence to the lock's rotating discs. Something clicked deep within the mechanism. The door swung inward on hinges that protested but held. The space beyond was small, perhaps 6 feet deep and equally wide. But what it contained made Elena forget to breathe. Shelves lined the walls, each holding items wrapped in oilcloth or sealed in protective casings. Even through the coverings, Elena could see the quality of what lay beneath. The distinctive gold leaf of illuminated manuscripts, the careful wrapping that suggested paintings, wooden crates stacked on the floor, their surfaces marked with stamps and dates she couldn't quite read in the dim light. She reached for the nearest manuscript case with hands that shook. The protective casing was professional grade, the kind museums used for priceless documents. Inside, vellum pages glowed even in her flashlight's harsh beam. Illuminations in red and gold. Latin text in a hand she recognized from her studies, 15th century Italian, probably monastic. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This wasn't amateur work. This was a professional cache, hidden with intention and expertise. Elena worked methodically, photographing everything before touching it. Years of museum training kicked in despite her racing heart. She documented the shelves, the arrangement, the condition of each item. Her phone's memory filled with images of manuscripts, paintings still wrapped but showing edges of gilded frames, documents sealed in waterproof containers. Then she found the journal. It was leather-bound, thick, sitting alone on the bottom shelf. Unlike everything else, it wasn't sealed or protected. Someone had meant for it to be found, to be read. The first page was dated 1946. Father Thomas McKenna's personal journal. The handwriting stated in careful script, "God forgive me for what I've done. God forgive me for what I must continue to do." Elena sank to the floor, her flashlight propped against a crate, and began to read. McKenna had been young when the artifacts arrived, barely 30, newly assigned to the cathedral. An older priest, Father Brennan, had supervised the transfer. Vatican artifacts, he'd been told, saved from the Nazis, hidden for safekeeping until the war's chaos settled. But Father Brennan had included something else in the cache. Documents, letters, ledgers, evidence, he'd called it, of sins that couldn't be buried with the dead. Beneath the journal, Elena found what McKenna had described. A letter yellowed with age, written in Italian. The handwriting was different from McKenna's, smaller, more rushed. It was addressed to whoever finds this, and signed by someone named Teresa Moretti. Elena's Italian was rusty, buried under years of disuse, but she could parse enough. Teresa had been an archivist. She'd witnessed something during the war. She'd documented everything. The artifacts were real, saved from Nazi plunder. But so was the evidence she'd smuggled alongside them. Proof of collaboration, proof of embezzlement, proof of funds meant for refugees diverted to private accounts. Those who would use God's treasures for evil. Elena read aloud, her voice strange in the enclosed space. She photographed every page, every document she could access. Vatican seals on correspondence. Dates from 1943, 1944, 1945. Names she didn't recognize but sensed were important. Financial records showing transfers of massive sums. Her phone showed dozens of images when she finally stopped. Her knees ached from kneeling on stone. Her mind raced with possibilities and fears in equal measure. The artifacts alone could be worth millions. She'd need proper authentication, but her training told her these were genuine. Museum quality. Historically significant, the kind of pieces that appeared in international headlines when they resurfaced. But the documents, those were something else entirely. Those were dangerous. Elena's hands found the journal again, flipping to McKenna's final entries. The handwriting had changed over the decades, growing shakier, more uncertain. His last entry was dated 3 months ago. "I've decided to act. After 40 years of cowardice, I'll finally do what Teresa intended. The truth cannot stay buried. Not anymore. Bishop Walsh suspects something, but he won't interfere. He's too afraid of Rome. I've compiled everything. Made copies. Tomorrow I contact the authorities. God grant me the courage Teresa had. God protect what I'm about to unleash." There were no more entries. 3 months ago, Father McKenna had died. The county clerk had mentioned it in passing. Tragic accident. Fall down the crypt stairs. found by a delivery driver days later. Elena sat in the hidden vault, surrounded by treasures and secrets, and felt the full weight of what she discovered settle onto her shoulders. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was a responsibility, a burden, a choice that would define everything that came after. She thought about Sophie's college applications, about Liam's quiet hope when he'd found the marked stone, about Marcus's condescension and her cramped apartment and all the ways her life felt like a cage she couldn't escape. She thought about Teresa Moretti, dead in 1947, trying to expose the truth, about Father McKenna, dead 3 months ago, finally finding courage too late. Elena Russo stood and began gathering her things. She had decisions to make, but not here. Not now. First, she needed to understand exactly what she'd found. Then she needed to figure out what the hell to do about it. As she climbed back into daylight, leaving the vault open behind her, she didn't notice the car parked 3 blocks away. Didn't see the man with the telephoto lens, capturing images of her emerging from the cathedral's crypt. The wheels were already in motion. Elena had opened a door that had been sealed for 70 years, and there were people, powerful people, who'd spent decades ensuring it stayed that way. Her phone buzzed as she reached her car. A text from Sophie. "Dad's asking questions about the cathedral. What should I tell him?" Elena stared at the message, then back at the cathedral's broken facade. "Nothing," she typed back. "Tell him nothing." But she knew it was already too late for that. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, surrounded by printed photographs from the vault. The apartment was silent. Sophie at Marcus's for the week, Liam asleep in the room they shared. Just Elena and 70 years of buried secrets. She'd started with the manuscripts. Her training kicked in despite exhaustion, identifying scripts and styles. The Caravaggio sketch made her hands shake when she found the signature. Hidden in shadow work, exactly where the master always placed it. Genuine, possibly unknown to scholars. Worth millions by itself. The illuminated manuscripts were earlier. 15th century, definitely Italian. Monastic work, probably from a scriptorium attached to a major cathedral. The kind of pieces that belonged in climate-controlled cases at the Vatican museums. By 3 a.m., her conservative estimate had reached over $100 million. Possibly much more with proper authentication. But it was the documents that kept her awake until dawn. Financial ledgers from 1943 to 1946. Vatican diplomatic correspondence. Names she'd started researching, high-ranking church officials during Mussolini's regime. Transfer records for funds designated Refugee Relief, Papal Emergency Committee. Except the money hadn't gone to refugees. She could trace it through the ledgers, watching millions of lira flow into numbered accounts in Switzerland, into property purchases in Argentina, into investments that enriched men who'd sworn vows of poverty. The refugees, Jewish families fleeing Nazi persecution, political dissidents, resistance fighters, had received a fraction of what had been raised in their name. The rest had simply vanished into the pockets of those meant to protect them. Teresa Moretti's letters made it personal. She'd been 26 when she'd started documenting the theft. A low-level archivist with access to correspondence most people never saw. She'd watched it happen. Watched church officials smile for photographs while refugee ships were turned away. Watched them dine with fascist officers while families died in camps. So she'd copied everything. Smuggled it out piece by piece. Hidden it with artifacts she'd helped evacuate from churches in the Nazis' path. Elena rubbed her eyes, reaching for cold coffee. Her museum shift started in 4 hours. She needed to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop. Her phone buzzed. A text from Henry Chun, her lawyer. "Saw your lights on. You okay?" Henry lived 2 buildings over, kept late hours preparing cases for clients who couldn't afford anyone else. He'd guided her through the divorce, watched Marcus's expensive lawyers steamroll her rights, and charged her half what he should have. She texted back, "Can you come over? Need legal advice." 5 minutes later, he knocked softly. Henry was 41 but looked older. Gray threading through black hair, permanent exhaustion around his eyes. He carried a file folder and coffee from the 24-hour place on 3rd Street. "Please tell me you didn't kill someone," he said, setting coffee on her table. Elena almost laughed. Worse. I think I found stolen property. A lot of stolen property. She walked him through it. The cathedral, the vault, the artifacts. Henry's expression shifted from concern to something approaching horror as she showed him the photographs. Elena. His voice was careful. Do you understand what you're describing? Cultural artifacts hidden during World War II. Stolen Vatican property, he interrupted. That's how they'll frame it. And these documents. He'd reached the financial ledgers, the correspondence. Jesus. Do you know what diplomatic immunity means? What resources the Vatican has? I haven't stolen anything. I bought the cathedral legally. Finders keepers doesn't apply to cultural artifacts. There are international treaties. The Vatican could claim everything, and you'd have no recourse. 0. Henry pulled out his own laptop. Let me show you some precedents. They were all devastating. Private citizens who discovered artwork, ancient texts, religious artifacts, all seized by governments or institutions claiming ownership. Most received nothing. Some faced criminal charges for not reporting the finds immediately. And that's assuming the Vatican acts legally, Henry continued. They won't. They'll bury you in litigation, tie up your assets, make your life hell until you surrender everything. So what do I do? Henry was quiet for a long moment. Report it. Today. Call the FBI, tell them what you found, cooperate fully. Maybe you'll get a finder's fee. Small percentage. Enough to cover your legal costs if you're lucky. Elena looked at the photographs spread across her table. Sophie's college acceptance letters sat in a pile by the refrigerator. Columbia had been her top choice. The financial aid package covered half. How much is a finder's fee usually? For something like this? Could be nothing. Could be $50,000 if they're feeling generous. Not enough. Not nearly enough to change anything. What if I didn't report it? Elena asked quietly. Henry's expression hardened. Then you'd be committing a federal crime. Possession of stolen property. Possibly international trafficking if you tried to sell anything. You'd lose custody of your kids. Elena. Marcus would bury you. The words hit like Marcus's lawyers had 2 years ago. Precise and devastating. I wasn't going to sell them, she said, though the lie tasted bitter. I just needed to understand what I'd found. Then you need to call the FBI. Today. Before word gets out. But word was already getting out. Elena had made her first mistake that afternoon, seeking authentication advice from a colleague at the museum. Dr. Patricia Vance, who specialized in Renaissance manuscripts, who'd been kind during the divorce, who'd promised discretion. Patricia had kept that promise for exactly 16 hours before mentioning it to a visiting scholar from Georgetown, who'd mentioned it to a colleague in Rome, who'd sent a carefully worded email to certain offices in Vatican City. By the time Elena met with Henry, Father Dominic Pierce was already reviewing that email on a flight from Rome to Philadelphia. The message was brief. Possible recovery situation. Pennsylvania. Cathedral artifacts. McKenna Estate. Advise immediate response. Dominic had been handling recovery situations for 20 years. He knew exactly what that meant. At the same time, FBI Art Crime Team Detective Maya Santos was reading a tip that had come through the anonymous hotline. Suspicious activity at recently purchased cathedral. St. Augustine, Pennsylvania, possible artifact trafficking. Maya had handled enough cases to recognize the pattern. Someone had found something valuable and didn't know how to proceed. These situations went one of two ways: cooperation or disaster. Her job was steering them toward cooperation. She made a note to drive out tomorrow, do preliminary investigation. Nothing urgent, just due diligence. And in his home office, Marcus Russo was reviewing the text Sophie had sent earlier. Mom bought an old church. Won't tell me why. She's acting weird. He'd called Elena, gotten defensive answers, and decided to dig deeper. Marcus had resources, connections. He made a few calls to his lawyer, to a private investigator he'd used during the divorce, to the county clerk's office. By midnight, he knew about the cathedral purchase, the property records, the previous owner's mysterious death. His lawyer called back with interesting information. If she found anything of value on that property, and you were still married when she started planning the purchase, you might have a claim. Plus, given her recent behavior, we could argue she's creating an unstable environment for the children. Marcus smiled. Elena had always been impulsive. He'd spent 15 years managing her impulses, keeping her from embarrassing them both. Now she'd finally made a mistake he could use. Draft the paperwork, he told his lawyer. Emergency custody motion. We'll file next week. Elena knew none of this as she sat with Henry, trying to figure out her next move. She didn't know about Dominic's flight or Maya's investigation or Marcus's maneuvering. She just knew she was tired. Tired of being powerless. Tired of Marcus winning. Tired of counting pennies while her children grew up in an apartment that smelled like other people's cooking. Give me 24 hours, she told Henry. Let me research the legal options properly. Then I'll decide. Henry looked like he wanted to argue but finally nodded. 24 hours. But Elena, be careful. People have died over less valuable things than what you found. After he left, Elena returned to the documents. Father McKenna's journal, specifically. His entries about the previous priest, Father Brennan, who'd helped Teresa Moretti hide the artifacts. Brennan had died in 1952. Natural causes, the journal said, though McKenna had written, "Sometimes I wonder. He knew too much, carried too much guilt." And Teresa Moretti herself died in 1947, drowned in a bathing accident in Rome. McKenna had underlined that passage in his journal, added in the margin. No one who knew Teresa would believe she drowned by accident. She was a strong swimmer. She was careful. She was hunted. Elena stared at those words until they blurred. Outside, dawn was breaking over St. Augustine. In a few hours, she'd need to wake Liam, make breakfast, pretend everything was normal, go to work, smile at museum visitors, substitute teach fifth graders who'd never know their teacher had spent the night calculating the price of truth. Her phone buzzed again. Sophie, calling from Marcus's house. Mom, Dad wants to know more about the cathedral. He says if there's any legal issues with the purchase, his lawyer can help. He's being really nice about it. Elena closed her eyes. Marcus was never nice without reason. Tell him thank you, but I have it handled. Are you sure? He seems really concerned. Sophie. I'm sure. After they hung up, Elena sat in the growing light, surrounded by evidence of decades-old crimes, trying to figure out how to protect her children from the storm she'd unleashed. She didn't know it was already too late. The forces she'd set in motion were converging. Within 48 hours, her small apartment would feel like a cage, with predators circling just outside the bars. But for now, in this brief moment of quiet, Elena Russo made a decision. She opened her laptop and began composing an email to Dr. Vance, asking for contact information for Vatican art authentication services. If powerful people wanted the artifacts, she'd make them pay for them, legally, through proper channels. She'd negotiate, take the finder's fee, and walk away with enough to change her life without risking everything. It was a reasonable plan, logical, safe. She hit send and felt something like relief. She had no idea she'd just invited the wolf into her home. Father Dominic Pierce arrived in St. Augustine on a gray Tuesday morning, 48 hours after Elena's email. He didn't announce himself. That wasn't how these situations worked. Instead, he checked into the Comfort Inn on Route 22, unpacked his single carry-on bag, and spent an hour reviewing everything his office had compiled. Property records, Elena Russo's financial history, her divorce proceedings, employment records, social media accounts, minimal, carefully curated. Her children's school information, her lawyer's background. He knew her before they'd ever met. That was the advantage institutions had over individuals, resources, patience, and the long view. Dominic was 52, though most people guessed younger. He kept fit, dressed well but not ostentatiously, and had perfected the art of appearing both approachable and authoritative. His Irish accent had softened during 20 years in Rome but emerged when useful. People trusted accents, found them charming, disarming. He'd spent those 20 years handling situations exactly like this one. Lost artifacts surfacing. Uncomfortable documents appearing in estate sales. Scandals threatening to erupt. His job was simple. Contain, recover, protect the church. He genuinely believed in that mission. The church did immeasurable good in the world. Hospitals, schools, charitable works that saved millions of lives. Yes, there were sins in its past. Every institution that survived 2,000 years carried sins. But dwelling on historical grievances helped no one. Moving forward, doing good now, that's what mattered. The documents Elena had found were historical grievances. Embarrassing, certainly, potentially damaging to the church's reputation, but ultimately meaningless compared to the good the church accomplished daily. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant in Rome. Bishop Walsh, aware of situation, willing to cooperate, suggests approaching subject through pastoral concern angle. Dominic smiled. Bishop Walsh was predictable. A bureaucrat terrified of controversy, desperate to please Rome. Useful. He drafted a response. We'll contact subject today. Arrange meeting with Walsh tomorrow. Keep legal team on standby. Then he drove to Elena's apartment. Elena was running late. She'd overslept after another sleepless night, burned Liam's breakfast, and couldn't find her museum ID badge. The knock on her door came as she was trying to simultaneously pack Liam's lunch and review her substitute teaching notes. 1 second, she called, expecting a delivery or a neighbor. The man at her door looked nothing like what she'd expected. Mid-50s, silver threading through dark hair, wearing a dark suit and clerical collar. His smile was warm, his eyes kind. Ms. Russo? I'm Father Dominic Pierce, from the Vatican's Office for Cultural Heritage. I apologize for the unexpected visit. Might I have a moment of your time? Elena's stomach dropped. I have to get my son to school. I'm already late. Of course. Perhaps this evening? I'm staying at the Comfort Inn. I could meet you anywhere that's convenient. His voice was gentle, reasonable. I understand you've made a remarkable discovery at the Cathedral. I'd love to discuss how we might proceed in a way that benefits everyone involved. Benefits everyone. The words sounded so reasonable, so cooperative. Mom! Liam appeared behind her, backpack slung over one shoulder. We're really late. Dominic's gaze shifted to Liam, and something in his expression made Elena step protectively sideways, blocking her son from view. This evening, she said firmly. 7 o'clock, at the Cathedral. Perfect. Dominic handed her a business card. I look forward to our conversation. He was gone before she could respond, disappearing down the stairs with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew she couldn't escape this meeting. Elena dropped Liam at school and called Henry from her car. Vatican's here, she said without preamble. A priest, Father Dominic Pierce. He wants to meet tonight. Henry was quiet for a moment. Don't meet him alone. I'll be there. Henry. Elena. These people aren't your friends. They're not here to help you. They're here to take everything and make sure you can't fight back. You need a witness. She wanted to argue, wanted to believe Dominic's kind eyes and gentle voice meant cooperation was possible. But Henry had guided her through one nightmare already. She trusted his instincts. 7 o'clock. The Cathedral. After they hung up, Elena sat in her car outside the school, watching parents drop off children who weren't worrying about Vatican investigators or 70-year-old conspiracies. Normal children. Normal lives. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ms. Russo, this is Detective Maya Santos, FBI Art Crime Team. I'd like to discuss your recent cathedral purchase. Please call at your earliest convenience. Elena stared at the message. Vatican investigators and FBI, both arriving within hours of each other. Her hands shook as she dialed Henry again. The FBI just contacted me. Jesus Christ. She heard papers rustling. Okay, don't respond yet. Let me research precedents for this situation. There might be a way to play them against each other. Henry, I can't play anyone against anyone. I'm a museum docent and substitute teacher. These are the Vatican and the FBI. Which means you need someone on your side who understands how power actually works. His voice gentled slightly. I know you're scared, but you can't give up without fighting. Not yet. After they ended the call, Elena drove to the museum on autopilot. Her shift passed in a blur. Tourists asking about Civil War exhibits while her mind calculated impossible odds. Vatican resources versus FBI authority versus her complete lack of leverage. At 3, she left for her substitute teaching assignment. 5th graders working on state history projects, most of them more interested in their phones than Pennsylvania's industrial heritage. Elena remembered being their age, believing hard work and honesty mattered, that good people won and bad people lost. Her phone buzzed during quiet work time. Sophie, texting from school. Dad wants to take us to dinner Friday. Says he has something important to discuss. Do we have to go? Elena's chest tightened. Marcus never wanted family dinners unless he had an agenda. She typed back, You don't have to do anything you don't want to, but it might be good to hear what he has to say. The response came immediately. He's going to try to make you look bad. He always does. Sophie understood Marcus better than Elena had at 16. Maybe that was growth. Maybe it was just damage. By the time Elena reached the cathedral that evening, darkness had fallen. Henry's car was already there, parked beside the entrance. He stood near the door, hands in his pockets, looking exhausted. FBI called my office, he said as she approached. Left a message saying they'd appreciate my client's cooperation. Very polite, very threatening. What does that mean? Means they know you have a lawyer. Means they're establishing a paper trail showing they tried to work with you before taking action. He pulled out a folder. I spent the day researching. It's not good, Elena. International cultural property law favors institutions. The Vatican has diplomatic immunity. If they claim the artifacts, you have almost no recourse. Almost. There's precedent for finder's fees in cases where the finder cooperates fully and immediately, usually 5 to 10% of assessed value. Elena did the math. 5% of 100 million was 5 million. Enough to transform everything. College tuition, a real house, security. That's if they're feeling generous, Henry continued. More likely they'll offer a token amount and threaten litigation if you refuse. They'll drag it out until you can't afford to fight anymore. Headlights swept across them. A rental car pulled into the lot, and Father Dominic Pierce emerged, still wearing his clerical collar but now with a leather messenger bag slung across his shoulder. Ms. Russo, he nodded to Henry, and you must be Mr. Chun. Thank you both for meeting me. His voice was still gentle, still reasonable. But Elena noticed how his eyes catalogued everything. Henry's cheap suit, her worn jacket, the cathedral's obvious decay, calculating their vulnerabilities. Shall we go inside? Dominic gestured toward the entrance. I'm eager to see what you've discovered. Elena unlocked the door, leading them through the nave toward the crypt stairs. Her flashlight beam cut through shadows that seemed darker than before, heavier with secrets and consequences. In the crypt, she showed them the vault. Watched Dominic's expression shift from professional interest to something sharper, more intense, as he examined the artifacts. Remarkable, he murmured, carefully photographing manuscripts with his phone. Simply remarkable. These have been missing since 1946. We'd assumed they were destroyed or stolen by Nazi forces. His gaze found Elena's. You've done the church an extraordinary service by preserving them. She didn't preserve them, Henry interjected. She discovered them, on property she legally purchased. Dominic smiled. Of course, which is why the Vatican is prepared to offer Ms. Russo a finder's fee of $500,000 for the safe return of church property. Tax-free, naturally. Plus our gratitude and a letter of commendation for her contribution to cultural preservation. 500,000. Enough to change things. Not enough to transform them. Elena's mouth was dry. I'd need time to consider. Naturally. Though I should mention. Dominic's voice remained gentle, but something shifted in his eyes. These artifacts are Vatican property under international law. The church has been searching for them for decades. We're offering the finder's fee as a courtesy, Ms. Russo. But with or without your cooperation, they will be returned to their rightful home. The threat was subtle but clear. Cooperate and profit, or resist and lose everything. Henry stepped forward. My client will need time to consult with legal counsel and consider all options. We'll be in touch within 48 hours. Dominic studied them both, then nodded slowly. Of course, though I hope you understand that time is somewhat pressing. Once word spreads about this discovery, and word always spreads, other parties may become involved. Federal authorities, international art dealers. It becomes complicated. He handed Elena a business card. I'm at the Comfort Inn, room 214. Call anytime. After he left, Elena and Henry stood in the vault's dim light. He's not just threatening legal action, Henry said quietly. He's threatening everything else too. Your reputation, your custody situation, your safety, maybe. Elena's hands were shaking. 500,000 isn't enough. No, it's not. But it might be all you can get. She thought about Sophie's college letters. About Liam's hopeful eyes when he discovered the marked stone. About Teresa Moretti, dead at 26, trying to expose the truth. What if I don't want to just get what I can get? Elena asked. What if I want them to pay for what they did? Henry was quiet for a long moment. Then you need to understand something, Elena. People who fight the Vatican don't usually win. They usually just disappear from the conversation. Discredited, bankrupted, or worse. He met her eyes. I'll help you either way, but you need to know what you're choosing. Elena looked at the artifacts surrounding them. Millions of dollars in stolen beauty. Evidence of crimes that had killed thousands. A choice between safety and justice that shouldn't exist but did. I need to think, she said finally. Outside, as they walked to their cars, neither noticed the second vehicle parked 3 blocks away. Inside, a man with expensive cameras had been photographing their meeting. Tomorrow, Marcus Russo would receive those photographs along with a preliminary investigator's report. And in another car, Detective Maya Santos sat reviewing the tip that had brought her to St. Augustine. She'd watched the meeting, noted the Vatican priest's presence, recognized the pattern of institutional pressure on a vulnerable individual. She'd seen this before. It never ended well. Maya started her car and pulled away, already planning her approach. She'd give Elena one more day before making contact. Sometimes people needed time to realize they were drowning before they'd accept help. Back in her apartment, Elena found Sophie waiting up, laptop open to news articles about Vatican art controversies. Mom, her daughter said quietly, be careful. These people don't play fair. Elena sat beside her, studying the articles about suppressed scandals and silenced whistleblowers. She thought about Father Dominic's kind eyes and gentle threats, about Henry's exhausted pragmatism, about $500,000 that wasn't enough to heal anything. I know, baby, she said. I know. But knowing wasn't the same as having a solution. And as Elena lay awake that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd already lost control of the situation, that forces larger than she'd imagined were converging, and she was just an obstacle to be removed. The only question was how they'd choose to remove her. Elena spent 3 sleepless days translating Teresa Moretti's documents with her former professor's help. The truth emerged. Vatican officials had embezzled millions meant for war refugees, collaborated with fascists, then murdered Teresa in 1947 to silence her. Father McKenna discovered this, decided to expose it, and died 2 weeks later, no accident. Father Dominic returned on Thursday morning, the charm gone from his voice. He stood in Elena's doorway holding a manila folder, his expression cold. 48 hours have passed, Ms. Russo. I need your answer. Elena's hand tightened on the doorframe. She hadn't slept. The custody papers sat on her kitchen table alongside translated documents proving 70 years of Vatican crimes. I'm still considering. Let me help you consider. Dominic opened the folder. Surveillance photos spilled out. Liam walking home from school, Sophie at her coffee shop job, Elena herself entering the cathedral. We know your routine, your children's routines, your financial situation, your ex-husband's custody motion. Elena's blood turned to ice. Are you threatening my children? I'm showing you reality. His Irish accent had hardened. You have two options. Accept $750,000 and return church property quietly, or face legal warfare that will bankrupt you, cost you custody, and accomplish nothing. The artifacts return to Rome either way. Your choice is whether you profit or suffer. Get off my property. Dominic's smile was thin. You have until Sunday. After that, I can't protect you from what happens next. That afternoon, Gabriel Thorne appeared at the cathedral. He was British, mid-40s, expensively dressed. Everything Dominic pretended to be, but with brutal honesty instead of false warmth. Ms. Russo, I won't waste your time with threats disguised as offers. He handed her a card. $8 million, cash, untraceable. The Vatican pays $500,000 and destroys you legally. I pay $8 million and disappear. Your choice is whether you want justice or survival. Those artifacts belong to dead people and corrupt institutions. Teresa Moretti is dead. Father McKenna is dead. The refugees whose money was stolen are dead. You're alive with two children who need you. Gabriel's voice softened slightly. I know Dominic visited you. I know about Marcus's custody motion. I know the FBI is investigating. You're surrounded by predators, Ms. Russo. I'm just the only one honest about it. After he left, Elena sat in the empty nave, Gabriel's card in one hand, Dominic's ultimatum in the other. Her phone buzzed. Maya Santos. My investigation was shut down. Superiors said Vatican diplomatic immunity makes prosecution impossible. I'm officially off the case. Unofficially, be very careful. Dominic has made problems disappear before. Then Henry. Marcus filed emergency custody motion. Court date Monday. He's claiming you're under federal investigation, involved with criminals, creating dangerous environment for kids. Elena, we need to settle this. Take Dominic's offer, end this now. Then Sophie. Mom, someone's been following me. Same car, 3 days straight. I'm scared. Elena stared at her daughter's text, hands shaking. Liam at school, vulnerable. Sophie being surveilled. Marcus weaponizing their fear. The Vatican tightening its grip. That evening, she returned to her apartment to find it ransacked. Nothing stolen, but everything searched. Her laptop moved. Documents scattered. A note on her kitchen table. 48 hours. Liam found her standing in the wreckage, tears streaming down her face. Mom! She pulled him close, feeling his thin shoulders, his rapid heartbeat. 12 years old and already learning that truth had a price, that courage could destroy you. We're okay, she whispered. We're going to be okay. But she didn't know if that was true anymore. Elena moved the children to Catherine's house that night. Her former professor lived 40 minutes away in a quiet neighborhood where no one knew about cathedrals or Vatican secrets. Stay here, Elena told Sophie and Liam as Catherine showed them the guest room. Don't go to school. Don't contact anyone. I'll handle this. How? Sophie's voice was sharp with fear. Mom, you can't fight these people alone. I'm not alone. I have Henry. I have Maya. Maya got shut down. Henry's a small-town lawyer. You have nobody. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Just take the money. Please, let's disappear and start over. Elena pulled her daughter close, feeling the tremor in her shoulders. 16 years old and already understanding that sometimes survival meant surrender. I can't, baby. If I give up now, I'm teaching you that power always wins. That truth doesn't matter. I can't do that. Back in St. Augustine, Elena met with Maya and Henry in a back corner of the Riverside Diner. Maya had brought encrypted USB drives and a laptop that wasn't connected to any network. We digitize everything, Maya said quietly. Create multiple backups. Establish a dead man's switch. If anything happens to you, everything goes public automatically. Henry nodded. I've contacted journalist allies, human rights organizations. We prepare information packets, ready to release. This will destroy your career, Elena told Maya. My career's already compromised. The moment my superiors shut down the investigation, I knew the fix was in. Maya's jaw tightened. I didn't join the FBI to protect institutional corruption. They worked through the night, scanning documents, uploading files to secure servers, creating redundancies. Elena's hands shook as she handled Teresa Moretti's letters, knowing each page was evidence of murders that had never been solved. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. Bishop Walsh, calling from an unknown number. Ms. Russo, I need to speak with you. Alone. It's urgent. Elena put him on speaker. I'm done with private conversations. Walsh's voice cracked. Father Dominic isn't just recovering artifacts. He's been authorized to use any means necessary. I've seen the communications from Rome. Ms. Russo, they're going to hurt you. Please just give them what they want. You've known about these artifacts for years, haven't you? You knew Father McKenna was murdered. Silence stretched. Then, I suspected, but I had no proof. And his voice broke. I was a coward. I chose my position over truth. I chose comfort over justice. But I can't stay silent while they hurt another person. Please, take Dominic's offer. Disappear with your children. Live. Like you've lived? Knowing you let good people die? Walsh hung up without answering. 2 hours later, Bishop Walsh was found dead in his rectory. Apparent suicide by hanging. But the staging was obvious to anyone looking. The chair positioned wrong, ligature marks inconsistent with self-infliction, a suicide note written in handwriting that wavered strangely. Maya got the call at dawn. She looked at Elena across the diner table, her expression grim. Walsh is dead. They're calling it suicide. Elena felt the diner tilt. He called me 5 hours ago. He was trying to warn me. I know. I have the phone records. Maya's voice was flat with rage. Which means Dominic was listening. Which means Walsh's death is a message. Henry's face had gone pale. Elena, you need to take your children and disappear. Right now. This isn't a legal battle anymore. This is survival. Before Elena could respond, her phone rang. Gabriel Thorne. Ms. Russo, I know about Walsh. I know Dominic has contractors in the area, professionals who specialize in permanent solutions. My offer stands, but you need to decide now. I can have you and your children out of the country by tonight. How do you know about the contractors? Because I've encountered them before. Vatican uses the same fixers for certain problems. Gabriel's voice was urgent. I'm not a good man, Ms. Russo, but I don't kill people. Dominic does. Choose survival. Elena hung up and looked at Maya and Henry, 2 people who'd risked everything to help her, who'd become collateral damage in a war they hadn't started. We go public, she said. Everything. Today. Before they can stop us. Elena, Henry started. No. Walsh died trying to grow a conscience. Teresa died trying to expose the truth. McKenna died trying to do the right thing. I won't let their deaths be meaningless. Her voice steadied. We release everything. All of it. Make it impossible to contain. Maya nodded slowly. I have journalist contacts. People who specialize in institutional corruption. But Elena, once we do this, there's no taking it back. Your life changes forever. It already changed. The moment I bought that cathedral. Elena pulled out her phone. Let's finish what Teresa started. They were preparing the final data packets when Sophie called, hysterical. Mom, Dad's here. At Professor Catherine's house. He's trying to make me leave with him. He says he's protecting me from you. Elena's blood froze. Put him on the phone. Marcus's voice was smooth, reasonable. Elena, be rational. The children need to be somewhere safe while you sort out this legal mess. Come stay with me until... You told Dominic where they were. The realization hit her like cold water. You've been feeding him information. I told the Vatican investigator that our children's welfare is my priority. He assured me that cooperation would result in the custody case being dropped. I'm protecting our family, Elena. something you've forgotten how to do. You sold out your own children. I'm saving them from their mother's delusions. Marcus's voice hardened. Take Dominic's offer or lose everything. Your choice. The call ended. Elena sat frozen, betrayal mixing with terror. Sophie won't go with him, Catherine said quietly from the doorway. She'd been listening. I won't let her. But Elena, he knows where they are. If Dominic's contractors. We finish this. Now. Elena turned to Maya. Send everything. Every journalist, every human rights organization, every contact you have. Flood the zone. Make it impossible to silence. Maya's fingers flew across her keyboard. Sending now. It's done. The story breaks in. She checked her watch. 6 hours. Every major news outlet will have the documents by morning. Elena called Sophie back. Pack. All of you. Go to Henry's office. Don't stop. Don't talk to anyone. I'll meet you there. After they hung up, Elena sat in the diner's back booth, watching the sun rise over St. Augustine. In 6 hours, the world would know about Vatican embezzlement, wartime collaboration, murdered whistleblowers. Her face would be everywhere. Her children's lives would never be private again. But they'd be alive. And the truth, Teresa's truth, McKenna's truth, would finally be told. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered, already knowing who it would be. Ms. Russo. Father Dominic's voice was cold. You've made a grave mistake. Whatever you've sent out will contain. Whatever protection you think you have, it's insufficient. And your children are beyond your reach now. Elena's voice didn't shake. In 6 hours, every major news organization will have proof of Vatican crimes. Walsh's murder. McKenna's murder. Teresa Moretti's murder. 70 years of cover-ups. You can't kill all of us fast enough to stop it. Dominic was silent for a long moment. You've destroyed yourself for nothing. The church has weathered worse scandals. This will be headlines for a week, then forgotten. But you'll be remembered as the unstable woman who sacrificed her children's welfare for attention. Maybe, but Teresa will be remembered as a hero. McKenna will be vindicated, and your career is over. Elena hung up. Maya looked at her with something like admiration. You just declared war on one of the world's most powerful institutions. No, I just finished a war Teresa started 75 years ago. Elena stood, gathering her things. Let's go get my children. Outside, the morning was bright and cold. Elena walked to her car, aware that everything had changed, that she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt like herself. Not Marcus's ex-wife. Not a struggling single mother. Not a victim. Just Elena Russo, finishing what braver women had started. Proving to her children that sometimes courage mattered more than safety. Even if that courage destroyed everything else. 24 hours remained before Dominic's deadline expired. Elena knew her original plan, controlled release through journalists, was compromised. Sophie's betrayal had given Marcus everything, and Marcus had given it to Dominic. She needed something faster, more public, impossible to contain. Working through the night in Henry's cramped office, Elena recorded a video. No script, no polish. Just her, a camera, and the truth. My name is Elena Russo. 3 weeks ago, I bought an abandoned cathedral for $100. Inside, I found artifacts worth $175 million, and evidence of crimes that have been hidden for 70 years. She displayed the documents on camera. Teresa Moretti's letters, the embezzlement ledgers, Vatican correspondence with fascist officials. Names, dates, amounts, everything. The Vatican has offered me money to stay silent. My ex-husband has filed for custody to control me. Federal investigators have been pressured to back off. A bishop who tried to help me was murdered yesterday, and it was staged as suicide. Her voice remained steady. I'm uploading copies of every document to multiple platforms. If anything happens to me or my children, everything releases automatically. This video posts in 12 hours unless I cancel it manually every 12 hours after that. She looked directly into the camera. Teresa Moretti was murdered in 1947 trying to expose this. Father Thomas McKenna was murdered 3 months ago trying to finish what she started. Bishop Raymond Walsh was murdered yesterday for growing a conscience. I won't let their deaths be meaningless. Elena uploaded the video to a dozen platforms, each set to publish simultaneously. Then she added Dominic's personal financial records, the files Gabriel had provided showing he'd profited from previous recoveries. Maya reviewed the setup. The solid, dead man switch is functional. If you don't cancel within 12 hours, everything goes live across every platform. Good. Elena turned to her children, who'd been silent throughout. I need you to understand something. What I'm doing might cost us everything. Our privacy, our safety, maybe our lives. Liam spoke first, voice quiet. Teresa died trying to do the right thing. Father McKenna died trying. If you hide now, they died for nothing. Sophie's eyes were red from crying. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I told Dad. I know, baby. You were scared. You wanted someone to protect us. Elena pulled her close. But sometimes protection means standing up, not hiding. Marcus arrived at the safe house an hour later, desperate to extract Sophie. He'd finally understood the stakes, that Elena wasn't backing down, that his cooperation with Dominic had made him complicit in potential murder. Elena, please, let me take the kids. Just until this is over. No. Sophie stepped between them. I'm staying with Mom. Marcus stared at his daughter, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Not an extension of himself. Not a bargaining chip. Just a young woman who'd made her choice. You're making a mistake, he said quietly, but he left without fighting. At dawn, Gabriel made one final appearance. He stood in Henry's parking lot, engine running, offering genuine escape. My plane leaves in 2 hours. Room for 3 passengers. New identities. Clean money. Fresh start. Last chance, Ms. Russo. Elena met his eyes. Thank you for the offer. And for the files on Dominic. Those files won't protect you when his contractors come. Maybe not, but they'll ensure he goes down with me. She extended her hand. You're not as immoral as you pretend. Gabriel shook it, something like respect in his expression. You're braver than you should be. I hope it's enough. After he left, Elena returned to the cathedral one final time, the place where everything had started. Where Liam had found the marked stone, where she'd discovered the vault, where she'd made the choice that led here. She stood in the crypt, surrounded by Teresa's artifacts, and felt the weight of 70 years of silence finally breaking. Her phone showed 11 hours until the video released. 11 hours for Dominic to make his move. Maya arrived with 2 agents she trusted, friends willing to act outside official channels. Henry brought food and coffee. Catherine came with Liam and Sophie, refusing to leave them alone. They waited together as morning stretched toward afternoon. Elena checked her phone every few minutes, finger hovering over the cancel button. At 6 p.m., Father Dominic arrived at the cathedral with 2 men Elena didn't recognize. The contractors Gabriel had warned about. Maya stepped forward, hand near her weapon. That's far enough, Father. Dominic's expression was cold fury barely contained. Ms. Russo, you have 1 hour to cancel that video and surrender all copies. After that, I cannot guarantee your safety or your children's. I think you mean you'll murder us like you murdered Walsh. Bishop Walsh took his own life. After you listened to him warning me. After he grew a conscience you couldn't tolerate. Elena's voice was steady. The video releases in 5 hours. Your career ends tonight, Father. The only question is whether you compound your crimes with more violence. Dominic's hand moved toward his phone. The contractors shifted position. Maya's weapon cleared its holster. Then Elena's phone rang. Sophie, calling from Henry's office where they'd gone for safety. Mom, there's a press conference happening. Henry set it up. We're streaming your video live. Right now. It's already viral. Elena's heart stopped. Sophie, Liam and I decided. We're not waiting for them to hurt you. Professor Catherine helped us. It's done, Mom. The whole world knows. Elena looked at Dominic and saw the moment he understood. His phone buzzed repeatedly. Rome calling, damage control failing, 70 years of secrets exploding across social media. The contractors hesitated, recognizing that murder was pointless now. The story was already out. Elena's death would only confirm everything. Dominic's face transformed, rage to despair to hollow acceptance. His life's work, unraveling in real time. "You've destroyed yourself for nothing," he said quietly. "The church will survive this. It always does. Maybe, but Teresa's vindicated. McKenna's vindicated. Walsh's death won't be forgotten." Elena moved closer. "And you? You're finished." One of the contractors fired. Not at Elena, at Maya, who'd moved to restrain them. The shot caught her shoulder, spinning her backward. Henry tackled the shooter. The second contractor fled. Dominic stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed world collapse. Maya, bleeding but conscious, looked up at Elena. "Go. Be with your children. I've got this." Elena ran. She found Sophie and Liam at the press conference Henry had arranged, surrounded by journalists and cameras. Her children, brave and terrified, telling the world about Teresa Moretti and Father McKenna and the price of buried truth. When they saw her, they ran into her arms, and Elena held them while flashbulbs exploded and questions flew and everything changed forever. "Did we do the right thing?" Liam whispered. Elena looked at her children. Sophie, who'd found her courage. Liam, who'd believed truth mattered. She thought about Teresa at 26 and McKenna at 78, both choosing principle over safety. "Yes," she said, "we did exactly right. The storm was just beginning. But for now, in this moment, they'd won. They'd finished what Teresa started. And they'd survived." Elena waited in the cathedral's crypt, surrounded by Teresa Moretti's artifacts, as Father Dominic Pierce arrived with 2 associates, the contractors Gabriel had warned about. The video had gone viral. Millions had seen the evidence. But Dominic came anyway, coldly furious. "You've made a terrible mistake," he said, descending the stairs. "The church will weather this scandal. We always do. But you've destroyed your life for nothing. Teresa didn't die for nothing. McKenna didn't die for nothing." Elena's voice was steady. "And you're finished." Dominic signaled the contractors. "Take her. We'll say she attacked us, tried to destroy evidence. No one will believe a desperate woman over Vatican officials." The confrontation escalated to physical threat. One contractor moved toward Elena. Then Maya Santos appeared in the doorway, FBI backup behind her. She'd called in every favor, presented colleagues with enough evidence of conspiracy to murder that they couldn't ignore it. "Stop, FBI. Nobody moves." A standoff ensued. Dominic claimed diplomatic immunity. Maya countered that immunity didn't cover conspiracy to commit murder on U.S. soil. Walsh's death, McKenna's death, the attempt on Elena. Elena's phone rang. "Henry, from the press conference. Sophie and Liam are live-streaming everything. The whole world is watching." Dominic realized he'd failed. Not just this mission, but his entire career of containment. In desperate rage, he tried to destroy the physical artifacts. If he couldn't control them, no one would have them. Contractor fired. Maya took the bullet, protecting Elena, wounded but alive. The contractors were subdued. Dominic, facing American criminal charges, made one final play. He'd cooperate fully, testify about Vatican internal operations, expose other cover-ups if granted immunity. His cooperation became the final betrayal of the institution he'd spent his life protecting. Not from principle, but pure self-preservation. Elena watched him break, understanding that institutional operatives were ultimately cowards. They served power until power couldn't save them. Then they served themselves. The truth was finally free, and Elena had survived to see it. 3 months later, Elena's life was unrecognizable. The story had exploded across international headlines. Vatican's hidden shame. World War II refugee fund embezzlement exposed. Mother's $100 gamble uncovers $175 million secret. Her face appeared on magazine covers, news programs, documentary trailers. The artifacts were seized by federal authorities pending legal determination, but Elena wasn't charged. Maya's testimony and her own cooperation with investigators established her innocence. The government awarded her a finder's fee, $5 million. Not Gabriel's $8 million. Not enough to match the artifact's full value, but enough to transform everything. The Vatican faced multiple lawsuits from families of World War II refugees. International pressure mounted for transparency and accountability. Several high-ranking church officials resigned. Others faced criminal investigations in multiple countries. Teresa Moretti's name was rehabilitated. Scholars recognized her as a whistleblower and moral hero. Her descendants were located in Italy. A granddaughter who wept reading Teresa's letters, understanding for the first time why her grandmother had drowned so young. Father McKenna's death was officially ruled homicide. His journal was published posthumously, becoming an unexpected bestseller about institutional loyalty versus moral obligation. Bishop Walsh was quietly acknowledged as a martyr by reformist Catholics who understood he'd found courage too late but found it nonetheless. Father Dominic Pierce awaited trial for conspiracy to commit murder. His cooperation deal granted limited immunity, but his reputation was destroyed. The institution he'd protected had abandoned him the moment he became a liability. Marcus's custody motion was dismissed. His reputation suffered. Colleagues learned he'd cooperated with those who'd threatened his children. He maintained minimal contact with Sophie and Liam now, his narcissism finally too obvious for even him to rationalize effectively. Maya recovered from her gunshot wound and received a promotion. The FBI, responding to public pressure for reform, elevated her as proof they took institutional corruption seriously. She and Elena stayed in touch, an unlikely friendship forged in crisis. Henry's practice thrived. High-profile clients sought the lawyer who'd stood against the Vatican. He still operated on sliding-scale fees, still believed everyone deserved representation, but now had resources to fight properly. Gabriel Thorne disappeared but sent Elena a package, a first-edition book about female resistance fighters during World War II with a note, "For someone who proved courage isn't obsolete." Sophie attended Columbia University, tuition fully covered. She'd grown during those terrible weeks, learned that safety purchased through complicity wasn't safety at all, that her mother's courage had been worth the risk. She called Elena twice weekly, voice lighter than it had been in years. Liam was in therapy processing everything. The counselor said he showed remarkable resilience. He'd witnessed real danger and real evil, but also real courage. His innocence was lost in some ways. He understood now that institutions could be corrupt, that power protected itself, that truth carried costs. But he'd also learned that ordinary people could challenge extraordinary power and survive. The cathedral, now historically significant, was being restored by a preservation trust. Elena accepted the position as museum director, finally using her art history degree, finally reclaiming the dreams she deferred from Marcus's career. The crypt became a memorial space honoring Teresa Moretti and Father Thomas McKenna. Their photographs hung side by side, with plaques explaining their courage and sacrifice. On a cold December morning, Elena brought Sophie and Liam to the cathedral for the memorial's dedication ceremony. They stood before Teresa's photograph, a young woman of 26, dark hair pinned back, serious eyes staring at the camera with quiet determination. "She looks like you, Mom," Liam said softly. Elena studied the photograph. Teresa had been younger, but yes, there was something similar in the expression. The look of someone who'd stumbled into confrontation with power and chosen to stand rather than retreat. "Read the letter," Sophie suggested. Elena pulled out Teresa's original letter, the one addressed to whoever finds this, now preserved behind museum glass but duplicated for this moment. She read aloud in the quiet crypt, her children beside her. "To whoever finds this, I am Teresa Moretti, archivist of the Vatican Secret Archives. I have witnessed crimes I cannot ignore: embezzlement of funds meant for refugees, collaboration with fascist officials, betrayal of innocent lives. I have documented everything and hidden it with artifacts evacuated from churches threatened by Nazi forces. Perhaps I am a coward for not exposing this immediately. Perhaps I am prudent. I do not know. What I know is that truth cannot stay buried forever. Someone, someday, must finish what I have started. If you are reading this, you are that someone. I pray you have more courage than I have found. I pray you succeed where I will likely fail. Do not let these crimes be forgotten. Do not let the dead be silenced twice. Teresa Moretti, January 1946. Inch silence filled the crypt after Elena finished reading. Then Liam spoke quietly. Was it worth it? Everything that happened? Elena looked at her son, 12 years old but aged by experience, still processing trauma but fundamentally intact. She looked at Sophie, 16 going on 30, cynicism tempered now by understanding that principles sometimes mattered more than safety. She thought about the cost. Her anonymity, gone. The trauma to her children. Maya's injury. Walsh's death. The terrifying weeks when violence felt imminent and inevitable. She thought about the alternative. Taking Dominic's money or Gabriel's. Teaching her children that power always wins. That truth doesn't matter. That courage is foolish when survival is available. She thought about Teresa at 26, McKenna at 78, Walsh finally finding backbone at 67. All of them choosing difficulty over comfort, principle over preservation. Ask me again in 20 years, Elena said honestly. But right now, looking at you both and knowing you watched your mother fight rather than hide, I think yes. I think it was worth it. Sophie leaned against her. Liam took her hand. They stood together in the memorial crypt. 3 people who'd survived something terrible and emerged changed but intact. Outside, winter sunlight filtered through restored stained glass. The rose window repaired, its patterns once again painting the floor in colors that had been dark for decades. Elena led her children toward that light, leaving Teresa's memorial behind but carrying her legacy forward. The world wasn't fixed. The Vatican still wielded enormous power. Institutional corruption continued. Justice remained imperfect and incomplete. But one piece of historical injustice had been addressed. One cover-up had been exposed. One family had learned they could face extraordinary pressure and survive. As they stepped into the December cold, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but peace. The complicated, hard-won peace of someone who'd made impossible choices and could live with the consequences. Her phone buzzed. A message from Maya. Documentary crew wants interviews next week. You ready for round 2? Elena smiled. Ready as I'll ever be. They walked to the car together, 3 people who'd gambled everything on truth and somehow impossibly won. Not perfectly, not without cost, but enough to matter. Enough to prove that sometimes, when ordinary people find extraordinary courage, the impossible becomes simply difficult. And difficult, Elena had learned, was something she could handle. The cathedral stood behind them, no longer ruined, no longer abandoned, but restored and purposeful. A monument to the truth that couldn't stay buried and the people brave enough to unearth it. Teresa Moretti's courage, 75 years later, had finally borne fruit. And Elena Russo, divorced mother of 2 who'd bought a cathedral for $100, had finished what a brave young archivist had started in the shadows of World War II. The story was complete. The circle closed. The dead vindicated. And the living, wounded but whole, could finally move forward into whatever came next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.